Check your bank account balance right now. Let's say you see $10,000 sitting in a basic savings account. The numbers look neat, clean, and completely static. They don't flash red warnings. They don't count down like a ticking bomb. So naturally, you feel safe. You tell yourself, I work hard for this 10 grand. It's sitting red there in the vault, completely protected. Now, let me ask you a brutally simple question. What can that $10,000 actually do for you today compared to 5 years ago? Back in 2020, $10,000 was a serious buffer. It was 6 months of rent, a reliable pre-owned car paid off in cash, a year's worth of high-quality groceries, or a long, Aviates international vacation with plenty of cushion left over. Today, lend exact same $10,000, the exact same numbers on your screen feels like it's supplicating. It barely covers the months of rent in a decent city. Try buying groceries, paying for gas, covering your health insurance, and booking a flight with it. And you watch that paper cushion disintegrate before your eyes. Your bank didn't steal a single penny from your balance. The statement still says $10,000, but the reality is squaring. Your money didn't vanish, yet your will got smaller. This is a great illusion of modern finance. We have been brainwashed to believe that wealth is the number on a screen. Dollar isn't. Wealth is not what you have. Wealth is what your money can buy. Paper currency is just an intermediary unit of measurement. And right now, the invisible measuring stick you use to evaluate your life is quietly shrinking every single day you slide. Most people spend their entire lives running on the financial hamster wheel, trying to earn more units of a currency without ever questioning what those units are actually worth. They don't realize that behind every dollar, euro, yen, or peso in circulation, there is an unannounced, quiet, and relentless war taking place. A war of a purchasing power. And if you don't understand the rules of this war, you will end up working 50 hours a week for the rest of your life just to stay in the exact same spot. To understand why your hard-earned cash is losing its muscle, you first have to destroy one of the biggest myths in human history. The idea that money has intrinsic, permanent value. Imagine you take a flight tomorrow. You put a plane in New York with $100 bill in your pocket. In Manhattan, that single green piece of paper gets you a decent meal and a short taxi ride. You hop on a plane, land in Paris, and hand the exact same bill to a local beaker. He stares at you, shakes his head, and refuses to give you a croissant until you exchange for your road. You hop on another plane and land in Vietnam. You exchange the same $100 bill at an airport counter, and suddenly the crook hands you over 2.5 million Vietnamese dong. You haven't gained new physical materials. You aren't holding gold bars or barrels of oil. You are holding printed pieces of paper with different historical figures drawn on them. So why does one green bill command vast amounts of goods in one market, require a conversion math puzzle in another, and buy millions of units in a third? The answer is simple. Money is not valuable because of the paper. It is valuable because millions of people share a collective and questioning belief that it will still buy something tomorrow. Money is nothing more than a social contract. It is a psychological agreement. Thousands of years ago, humanity used physical commodities, gold, silver, cattle, salt, because those items took physical labor to harvest or extract. You couldn't fake a gold coin. You had to dig it out of the dirt, melt it, and refine it. The physical energy required to produce the gold was what gave it trust. When modern governments decoupled paper currencies from gold reserves, money shifted from a physical anchor to a pure game affair. Modern currency rests entirely on three delicate pillars: public trust, national economic output, and global demand. If a government maintains a productive economy, keeps its laws stable, and manages its debt responsibly, citizens and foreign investors place their faith in that currency. They hold it because they trust they can trade it for real things later. But the moment that trust begins to fracture, the moment the state prints far more paper than the real world value it produces, the magic spell breaks. And when the spell breaks, paper goes back to its intrinsic value, zero. This brings us to the first silent killer of your hard-earned labor: inflation. Notice how the mainstream media loves to talk about inflation as if it is a weather event. They frame it like a sudden storm that inexplicably rolls in from the ocean. Prices are rising this quarter, they announce with grave faces. Let's call this what it actually is: a complete distortion of cause and effect. Prices don't simply rise on their own out of greed or bad weather. Prices are pushed up because the currency used to buy those goods is being diluted. Think of it like a pot of rich, flavorful soup. If you have 10 people coming over for dinner, you serve 10 dense, nourishing bowls. But if 50 unexpected guests show up at your door and you refuse to cook more food, what do? You dump 4 gallons of tap water directly into the pot. Suddenly, everyone gets a full bowl of liquid, but the soup tastes like plain water. Nobody got nourished. That is precisely what happens when central banks expand the money supply faster than the actual production, goods and services. If an economy produces 10 cars and has $10 in circulation, each car costs $1. If the government quietly prints $90 more out of thin air while the factory still only produces those same 10 cars, each car now costs $10. The cars didn't become 10 times more luxurious, rarer, or harder to make. The money simply became 10 times weaker. We see this played out across history with horrifying clarity, yet we refuse to pay attention. Look at Zimbabwe in the late 1980s. Zimbabwe was once considered the breadbasket of southern Africa, with a thriving agricultural sector and a relatively stable currency. But when the government faced massive political pressure, spiraling debts, and falling economic output, they fell into the oldest trap in human governance. They turned on the printing presses to pay their bills. They printed money to pay soldiers. They printed money to pay civil servants. They printed money to cover a foreign loan. At first, it seemed like an easy fix. But soon, shopkeepers realized that the paper flowing into their registers was backed by nothing. So, they raised prices to protect themselves. The government responded by printing even larger denominations. Within years, hyperinflation escalated to insane levels. Prices were doubling every 24 hours. People would walk into the grocery store with wheelbarrows overflowing with trillion-dollar bills just to buy a single loaf of bread or a roll of toilet paper. Workers insisted on being paid 3 times a day because their month's salary would lose half its purchasing power by their lunch break. Eventually, the Zimbabwean dollar became completely worthless. People used the bills as wallpaper, by a starter, and later, the entire society abandoned its own national currency and defaulted to using foreign money, like the US dollar, just to survive. Is that true? Zimbabwe's collapse taught the world a harsh, undeniable lesson. A government can print endless amounts of money, but it can never print trust. This leads to a fascinating paradox. A printing money distressed trust. Why is the US dollar remaining undispelled titans of the global financial system? Why can the United States run trillions of dollars in national debt, print currency its daver and speeds, and still have billions of people around the world desperate to hold greenbacks in their hand? It isn't because American paper is made of superior column. It is because the US dollar is backed by a geopolitical structure unlike anything the world has ever seen. The global dominance of the currency relies on 3 foundational lags: economic output, political stability, and global necessity. First, investors around the globe look for safety. If an international corporation or a foreign billionaire earns $50 million, they'd open a store in a country where military coup could happen overnight, or where the dictator may arbitrarily seize private assets. They want a store in a country with established property rights, an independent legal system, and a track record of stability. For all its political noise, the United States offers deep financial markets where capital can sit securely. Second, there is the factor of global trade usage, most famously illustrated by the petrodollar system. In the 1970s, the United States struck a monumental geopolitical deal with Saudi Arabia and other major oil-producing nations. The deal was simple: the US would provide military protection and hardware to the Gulf states, and in exchange, OPEC would price and sell their crude oil exclusively in US dollars. Think about what that meant for the rest of the planet. Every single country on Earth, whether it was Japan, Germany, Brazil, or India, needed oil to power its batteries, run its power grids, and fuel its transportation systems. And to buy that oil, they couldn't use their own domestic currencies. They were forced to sell their goods and services to the world in exchange for US dollars first, just so they could hold a reserve of greenbox buy energy. That arrangement created a massive, artificial, non-stop global demand for the dollar. It effectively allowed the United States to export its inflation to the rest of the world. While other nations had to produce physical goods to acquire dollars, America could simply issue paper to acquire real-world physical wealth. Now, how does all of this high-level geopolitical chess connect directly to your monthly bank statement? Through the single most powerful financial control lever in existence: interest rates. Most people scroll right past the news when the headline says the Federal Reserve changes interest rates by 0.5%. It sounds like dry, technical noise that only matters to guys in expensive suits on Wall Street. Not as a massive mistake. The central bank's interest rate is the master switch of your financial reality. It dictates the cost of borrowing money across the entire global economy. When a central bank slashes interest rates down near zero, as happened during major financial crises, money becomes exceptionally cheap to borrow. Banks flood the market with cheap loans. Businesses took on massive lines of credit to expand. Consumers took out low-rate mortgages to buy houses, and hedge funds borrowed money to buy stocks. The entire economy swerves on a wave of easy credit. But as we've seen, when that fast new credit hits the real world, it drives up the cost of real estate, stocks, food, and services. Eventually, when inflation gets out of hand, the central bank has to hit the emergency brakes. They raise interest rates aggressively. When interest rates rise, borrowing becomes expensive overnight. The $500,000 mortgage that used to cost a homebuyer $2,100 a month suddenly costs $3,500 a month at a higher interest rate. Buyers get pushed out of the market. Businesses freeze hiring because their debt payments just skyrocketed. Consumers stop spending on credit cards because the interest charges jumped to 22% or 25%. At the exact same time, global capital shifts direction. If the US central bank offers high interest rates on government bonds, global investors pull their money out of riskier emerging markets, sell their local currencies, and buy dollars so they can deposit them in high-yielding, safe American assets. The dollar gets stronger on the global stage, while smaller, weaker foreign currencies get crushed under the weight of capital flat. But inside the home country, everyday citizens feel the squeeze. Credit card debt turns into a trap. Mortgages become unaffordable, and businesses cut jobs. This brings us to an eternal loop of money. Capital is not loyal to flags or borders. Money flows relentlessly toward places where it feels safest and gets rewarded best. If you swim out and look at the globe, you realize that a currency's strength is a direct reflection of how much value that country can offer to the rest of the world. Look at a country like China over the last 40 years. When foreign corporations wanted to build manufacturing hubs, source electronics, or trade goods, they had to deal with Chinese factories. They had to pull physical infrastructure, factories, and technology into the region. That wood manufacturing capability creates structural, underlying support for the national currency. A currency is strong when a nation consistently produces things the world desperately needs, whether that is high-tech semiconductors, agricultural exports, industrial machinery, or energy resource. Conversely, look at what happens when a country spends decades taking on unsustainable national debt, suffers from severe political corruption, relies on a single declining export, or creates regulatory chaos for business. Kabbalah phrase. Investors set back. The government is forced to print even more money to cover its deficit, creating a downward spiral where the currency drops in value year after year. Your national currency is not a static raw. It is a live, real-time score of your country's economic standing, geopolitical leverage, and financial discipline relevant to the rest of the world. And if those fundamentals rot, the paper in your wallet decays right along with them. This brings us to the ultimate, most dangerous mistake that ordinary, hardworking people make every single day, thinking that cash is a neutral, risk-free asset. From the time we are young, we are conditioned by parents, teachers, and traditional parents' beliefs that saving money in a standard cash account is the ultimate sign of financial maturity. We are taught to work harder, don't take risks, and put your money safely in a bank. I want you to hear this loud and clear. Holding raw cash is not a neutral position. Holding pure cash is an active, a hedge-short position against the global economy. When you keep all your net worth sitting in a zero-interest savings account, you are making a massive, silent bath. No paper currency in history has preserved its purchasing power for a century. Every fuel currency ever created, from ancient Chinese paper money to the French assignats, the Weimar mark, and today's modern knobs, steadily loses purchasing power. Some collide in a hyperinflation firestorm within months. Others roll quietly at 3%, 5%, or 8% a year over decades. The outcome is identical. The patient saver, who followed all the traditional rules, gets quietly wiped out, while the person who understood how money works protected themselves. This isn't a call to panic. It's not an instruction to liquidate every dime and bury gold bars. You are currently billionaire. Central banks won't print more money. Governments won't manage debt perfectly. Geopolitical tensions won't disrupt energy. And inflation will magically vanish forever. History shows that bet has failed 100% of the time over every multi-decade period. It's a call to psychological awareness. Stop judging your financial success purely by the nominal numbers in your account. $1 million sounds like a fortune until a basic house costs $3 million and a car $200,000. The number is a vanity metric. Purchasing power is the only truth that matters. Pull the thread together and look back. Your money doesn't vanish overnight in a dramatic haste. It changes silently, millimeter by millimeter, every time a central bank balance sheet expands, a supply chain breaks, or inflation quietly bumps up your coffee, rent, insurance, and feeble. The numbers on your screen may stay frozen and reassuring, but the real leverage behind those digits, the human labor, time, and freedom they represent, can roll as or fall without you signing a permission slave. The truly will be those who navigate cycles for generations do not hold paper under a mattress. They invest in great businesses that raise prices during inflation. They hold prime real estate, tangible resources, productive farmland assets that deliver actual value regardless of what currency is being printed. They understand one foundational truth. You cannot store a lifetime of human energy in a medium created out of dinner with a keystroke. If you would your hard work to mean something decades down the road, stop treating currency as a permanent store of value. Trade it as what it is, a temporary tool for short-term transactions and a medium of liquidity. Learn how interest rates work. Watch global capital flows. Understand the difference between nominal price and real purchasing power. And start converting surplus paper into assets that hold unshakable value in the physical world. Your money loses power every day you leave it unattended in the dark. The numbers on your screen won't save you. If they squeak the noise, shared with someone still working hard, saving blind way, and wondering why they can't get ahead. Understanding how money actually works isn't a luxury anymore, it's the very first step to protecting your future.